Been watching ball with my big old brain and think the tape needs some explaining. Studying the stats to understand it. Hey, yo. Talk data to me. Talk data to me.
What is up, y'all? It is episode 3 of Talk Data to Me. I have someone very special here with me today. It is Mr. Rich Hribar. You guys probably know him best as Lord Reebs. Reebs, I'm gonna kind of dote on you here for a second. So we've got this partnership with Perplexity. A lot of people have heard them. I did this to Gretch yesterday, but it's an AI tool. So I just looked up. Why is Rich Hribar so highly regarded in the fantasy community? First of all, I said, what is Rich Hribar most known for? And it said you were highly regarded in the fantasy community. And so I said, well, why? Why is Rich Hribar so highly regarded? I think I already know the answer, but I wanted to see what AI told us, and I thought it was pretty amazing. Okay, expert use of advanced analytics. Your deep data analysis. Did you know this, Rich?
I did not.
To uncover unique strategic edges helps fantasy managers make more informed decisions. Here's one like I really love, and I think you are really good at this. There's some people in the space that I look up to because I like to talk a lot about data. And one thing I'm always trying to push myself at is, how do I get better at communicating complex ideas? How do you simplify them? How do you get them in a way that people can really take them in easily, right, and then apply it? Well, Perplexity, when it talks about you, says clear communication of complex ideas. You are praised for presenting complicated stats and roster strategies in a way that are practical and accessible to the everyday fantasy player. So, man, major hat tip to you, and I do agree with this.
Well, Perplexity should be my agent.
I think so. I can send you a link to everything as soon as the show's done.
Take this to Warren right now. I'm taking this to him right now.
Actually, I'll just put it on the screen. We got it up right here, guys. You guys can see it all. But respected by peers, Hribar is you're frequently cited and celebrated by other prominent analysts, not just any analyst, prominent analysts. So I think that's pretty cool. But man, I think the best part is just the summary. Your unique blend of deep statistical research, influential concepts, and accessible writing style, which I think is so key. Like, you do the research, you give the why behind your ideas, but you do it in a way that, I think can really reach a broad audience. And so, yeah, just want to start off with a big hat tip to you, right? And just pump you up, man. And hopefully your cheeks aren't too red.
Yeah. I don't handle that stuff well, but I mean, I'm grateful that the robots believe that I have all those strengths as well. So because when the overlords take over, I want the robots to be in my corner. But
absolutely, yeah.
But I was never a writer.
Terminator to not like you.
Like you. I mean, I think pretty much you didn't when you started too. You didn't have a writing background, correct?
No, my degree was actually in education and coaching. I was going to be a football coach, but then I was in sales and data and analytics.
So I was in sales too. I used to run spreadsheets for I was a production manager at a hydraulic seal company and manage like that stuff. And when I still remember Denny asking me the first time to come write for what was then XN Sports, and he was like, "Hey, will you write some articles?" I was like, "Dude, I don't know how to write anything." He was like, your data's good, you don't need to. So maybe it's just transitive that because I don't have a high level of writing quality, the regulars understand hey, he's talking to me.
What's funny is my world in the corporate world, like in my data and analytics role and strategy and product management, my world was a lot of presenting to upper folks in the company, right? The C-suite. And it was all about bullet points on a PowerPoint. And somehow I got into fantasy and I lost all of that. And I write 10,000 word columns. Maybe I just need to go back because I think you and I know we were just having this conversation. And I think your children are like mine. Like, my son doesn't want to read my 10,000 word article. He wants perplexity. It's what he wants. He wants the 5 bullet points of, okay, great, here's this article. What the heck? Like, give me the Spark Notes, the great Cam Newton, clip that goes around where he's like, Spark Notes. That's what they want today. So maybe we can learn, a little bit from maybe our past lives, Rich.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, listen, I just did a show at JJ, who's I think the master of trimming the fat off of analysis.
Oh yeah, JJ's amazing. Coming on next week, by the way. So
tease. What a tease. And you
Yeah.
just had Gretch on, and I think you fall into that same bucket with me and Gretch. We're like, we love the fat man. We like just explain how we got to everything.
Yeah. I mean, I want folks, you and I talked about this before the show, but the other idea behind this show is really teaching people how to fish. We are going to give you fish at the end, right?
Yeah.
And if you want that, it's okay. Just fast forward to the end. You really can. But the idea here is like we want to really share like how we come to these conclusions, and the research that we've done so that you can then take that and you can apply those concepts for yourself, right? And I think it just puts you in a better position as you're working your way through the fantasy season. If you've got an understanding of these concepts and what these things are built on, you can just apply them in so many ways. And honestly, you guys are going to come up with ideas we don't even have. Like you're going to build off of it and make it into something better. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about our community right now are all these young, sharp guys that are coming up and gals as well. And man, like taking concepts and things that maybe we originally came up with and like taking them to a whole nother level. And I'm like, oh my God, like, why didn't I think of that? But it all started off with like this understanding the concepts, understanding the research. And then that triggered questions in their minds to go do this additional research. And then they're coming back and hitting me with stuff. And I'm like, man, what you have is like better than what I had. Like
Yep.
I'm going to have to now go back and like revisit what I'm doing because now you've reopened my eyes to something else. And like that's what I hope we're accomplishing, with this show is just getting people excited. And I love getting to hang out with people like you, Rich.
Beautiful. I didn't see like because we're just recording this. And I apologize for not listening to the previous shows that have happened so far. Is there a poison intro to this show?
There is not a poison intro. There is the rap intro. So you will have to go back and check it out. Jake Trowbridge and Elias Mason did an amazing job. And
Oh yeah,
also I can't,
Jake is awesome.
yeah, he is phenomenal. And I can't take credit for the name of the show, Talk Data to Me.
Okay.
I had like 15 ideas. I let AI come up with like 15 ideas. I was working back and forth with our producers about what we were going to call it and all these different things. Talking Ball Y'all was one of the finalists. My wife steps into the door. We're trying to make our decision. We're like down to the final 3. And she's like, I have a submission. And she's like, talk data to me. So I typed it over into Slack, sent it to them, Nando DeFino, as well as Matt. And they were both like, that's it. They both knew like immediately. And I knew when I heard it comes from her
sheets have never been wetter.
Exactly. So
Spreadsheets, that is.
yeah, I knew what you meant. But my wife's gonna listen back to this, Rich, and think you are some sort. No, I'm just kidding. So she gets all the credit though, and she came up with that. She's pretty witty. I have to give her credit, and she's a hairstylist, so she sits and she talks.
Oh, that explains a lot. That explains a lot right now, man. Oh, because I'm looking at, I have a hat on for a reason, and you don't.
Yeah, she styles it in the morning. No, she doesn't style it in the morning, but she does say I have to represent the brand. So I try to do my best. So guys, we're going to be talking about some fun stuff today. Yesterday I had Ben Gretch on. I invite you to go back and check that out. And we just talked about wide receivers in general and what are the traits that we're looking for and the data, the different type of things that we're looking through. Rich and I'll probably hit on some of those things again today, but today specifically, we're going to really be diving into late wide receiver breakouts. And when we say late wide receiver breakouts, we're talking about guys that broke out in year 4 or later. And the reason why that's really, important is whenever you look at, I'm going to get this over here. This is me getting better as being a host here, Rich. But if we look at wide receiver breakouts, okay? Mm-hmm. And right now, wide receiver ones, so that's 16 fantasy points or more going back to 2011. That's basically, guys, if you average the top 12, the number 12 wide receiver and how many fantasy points they scored going back, it's 16 fantasy points per game, a minimum of 8 games. So rather than looking at each year where it's a moving target, I just made an average, right, of where these break points are based on historical data. So a wide receiver to score 16 or more fantasy points per game the first time in their career, that is what we call a wide receiver 1 breakout season. 15% of them did it in year 1. So those are your rookies. That's why guys like Ted McMillan, et cetera, they're really important. But year 2 is a huge year. 26% of the breakout wide receiver 1 breakouts came in year 2, and then 26% came in year 3. So if you guys are following along, you're doing the math, that means your wide receiver 1 breakout is by year 3, 68% of the time. So when you think about that and you're doing the rest of the math in your head, that means when the guys are breaking out after that, like they're more outliers. And for those of you that are listening along in the pod, like we've got the data up on the screen for the folks over on YouTube, but things just slow down. There's this thing that I kind of reference in my article, Rich, as the year 4 stall out. In year 4, wide receiver 1 breakouts, only 8% going back to 2011. Then we get a little surge in years 5 and 6. 11% and 11%. And part of that comes back to what happens in those years. There's often a shakeup. A player gets to leave a team. Sometimes, man, you just need a new lease on life. Like it happens. I remember, and I talked about this a little bit with Gretch yesterday. You probably got a similar story somewhere along the way, but I mostly have been really blessed to have great like bosses my entire career. But I had one bad one. And man, I'll tell you what, like I'm a hard driver. Like I've historically been really good at all my jobs, but I got to where I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to be part of that environment anymore. And so you have to remember, these are human beings, guys. And sometimes you need a new lease on life. You need to be, maybe the person that drafted you left after year 1. And you just got off on the wrong foot with the next coach or GM that came in. Maybe you didn't have a quarterback. And now you're Emmanuel Sanders and you get to, go play with Peyton Manning. I mean, there's just a lot of different things that can happen in those years that allow a shakeup. And wide receiver 2 breakouts. So these will be guys that we're talking about that scored 13 and a half fantasy points to 16, just under 16, 15.9. And it's the first time they do it. I won't go through all those numbers, but very similar to what we just talked about for the wide receiver ones. But I'm going to stop for a second here, Rich, because I know you've also done some research on this as well. And just curious as to your thoughts about where you see the break points and how you think about early and late breakouts and some of the high level macro trends you've seen.
Yeah, so I actually had an article come out that's very similar but different in a way. I instead of looking at it from like this is the first year this player achieved this, I looked at it more from like a finding value in your fantasy draft stance, like where these players are being drafted and how often they not only exceed AP but they exceed AP but provide wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 scoring seasons. And like pretty much there's a lot it's very similar overlap from a year trajectory that you have, which is really cool. And it makes sense for this, right? Like I think when you talk through this, like typically rookies do tend to underwhelm a little bit. And there's a reason for that. Josh Norris was the first to kind of highlight this with me when I worked at NBC at the time, because he had a background working in the draft room with the Rams. And he was like, hey, these rookies, this is like, they don't have a real offseason. It's like the only time in your NFL career you don't have a real offseason. You come straight out of college, then you immediately prepare for the combine. You go through the NFL draft, you go to rookie camp, and like all he's like, you just don't have like that. It all just is like a whirlwind. And so it's hard to hit the ground running in the NFL. So rookies like typically aren't as strong as year 2 and 3. And when you look at guys like year 2 that blow up, it's because you're acclimated to the NFL a little bit, right? Like you're able to have an offseason, you're able to take a pause, you're able to breathe. And when you talk about it from a fantasy stance, marrying what you put together and what I put together, they get depressed in cost because what do fantasy gamers do that we know every year? We're guilty of it too, of ourselves. What just happened is what we believe is static. So the last imprint we have of a player impacts their next year ADP very often, right? Like you see it every year. That's why these year 2 wide receivers, Jackson Smith and Jigba last year is like a great example of this, right? There's expectations for him as a rookie. He let down. People are like, oh, he kind of let me down. And then he comes back and he's a great value again, right? And like year 2 had another amazing year last year. I mean, obviously we had JSN, we had Jordan Addison. Rashee Rice was going to get there. Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, Jaden Reed were a little bit up and down, but those were guys that were still like undervalued. You had also Quentin Johnston, Demario Douglas, Marvin Mims, right? Like these are year 2 guys that improved as well. And then year 3, has always been like the thing, draft a year 3 wide receiver. Like, and then it makes sense. Like you said, year 4, it's typically these rookie contract players. One thing that you have to always acknowledge when we're talking about like these player age buckets, right, is the context of the league. Because remember, if you're in year 7, year 8, there's survivorship. Like you don't get to your third contract in the NFL unless you were good at those really first 2. So last year there were 248 wide receivers that played 1 snap or more on offense. 144 of those were rookie contract players, over half, right? only 38 were guys, eight plus in the NFL, right? So like we always got to talk about it in context too, like the players that we have. And so like you said, if you're on year 4 and you haven't panned out and your ADP is lower, then like there's a reason for that, right? Because you're just stuck in this, same neutral environment. It's hard to get out of. So yeah, that was a long-winded response to just say like a little bit different approach, but I found uncovered a lot of the same data as you did. And when I do mine, like I said, I'm only looking at guys that are being drafted outside of the top 24 too. Like guys that are being drafted as wide receiver 3s or lower.
Here's the great news. Most of the late breakout candidates, that's where they get drafted because of the other thing you talked about. The imprint is what you did last season. And even more so, well, you haven't done it in 3 seasons. So like, why am I going to believe in you now? And there are some guys though, that I think you probably should write off. And they can be on your fade list. I'm of the mind at any ADP, like there are guys, right, you can take a swing on, especially if you guys are building a portfolio of teams. But a lot of you are drafting one team, and I love the purity of that, to be honest. I think back to the days, Rich, when I had one fantasy league. And man, the morning of my draft was the closest thing to going back to being a kid on Christmas morning. Like that's the closest approximation of my internal feelings that I had on those mornings. And this is kind of a tangent, but I'm just going to go here anyway. Now I draft 300 teams, because of best ball and all the high stakes stuff. And while I still love it and I want to draft all these teams, and honestly, I need to have skin in the game, I think, honestly, to, really test my convictions. And we want to be good at our jobs. I want to make recommendations to people that I'm actually willing to put my money on. So I think it's a very important thing. But there is this small little piece of me that is just like, man, I miss those days of like, now I get excited for a draft, but not the way I did back then, where it was just like, oh my God, I'm about to get all, what presents am I going to get to open? Like, who am I going to get? I mean, back then I would reach like 3 rounds for my favorite sleeper. Like, it was just like, I'm getting the guy I want, right? It was a true my guys kind of mentality versus now you draft all these teams. I try to be really careful with the analysis that I put out there, because you can get stuck in this best ball world of where it is strategic to have a portfolio, but still like 90% of our audience or more, they're not drafting 100 best ball teams. They're drafting 1 or 2 home leagues. Sorry, tangent, but your thoughts on that and how that impacts like what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, well, the imprint of that best ball, the explosion that best balls had on top down fantasy analysis, like over the past couple of years, has just been like a whirlwind, right? Everyone's playing out like galaxy braining so many things right now, and all these angles, and there's certain ways to play the game that, from a format stance, is just different from a managed league, right? Like there's certain archetypes that just matter more in best ball, and a lot of people think like it's like guys like Alec Pierce, right? Like the big play dudes, or like DK Metcalf, but it's actually these other like dinky guys that you don't really think about.
It's guys that are going to be on the field that you would never know when to start them in your real lineup. But
slot receivers.
Darius Slayton is another good one. Like Darius Slayton at the end of a draft, right? Like I would never know when to start him in a managed league, and I also know he's not going to blow up and win me my league. But in a best ball league, like depending on bye weeks, I got a guy injured. Like if he comes through with that 18-point game in the right week, and he's eventually going to run into those games because he's going to be on the field 90% of the time. And so in a best ball format, I like Darius Slayton. I'm never drafting Darius Slayton in a home league.
No, and these like I said, the slot receivers are a good archetype that it boosts, because you don't have to do the thing where it's like, oh, Jaden Reed's had a 3-week stretch where he had only 6 targets in each game. I've got wide receiver X that has a good matchup. I'm going to insert him in my lineup and finally bench Jaden Reed because he's let me down 3 weeks in a row.
And Jaden Reed goes off.
And Jaden Reed cooked, and because he's a talented player, right? Like we have especially this year, we have a really good group of like slot dependent players. You have Josh Downs, you have Jaden Reed, you have Khalil Shakir, and they're all in good offenses, but they're also in offenses that are so good that they don't end up having to throw a lot of passes, which limits the wide receiver 3 in the offense. And then these touchdown dependent running backs, right? Like Jordan Mason in best ball is a great pick. In your managed league, like you're going to be so mad at Jordan Mason, like you're going to be like, oh, I have to chase this touchdown from him every week. And when do I put him in my lineup? Assuming like obviously there's contingency role. If like Aaron Jones would get hurt, he would get a boost. But in his typical face down role, you're like, I got to guess if he's going to score a touchdown this week. Like people have done this like Brian Robinson the last couple of years, or just insert X guy if you want to go back to TJ Duckett, if I want to date myself.
TJ Duckett.
Lendell White. Yeah, if you want to go back and date myself. But that archetype gets a boost in best ball. But in managed leagues, like those are guys I try to avoid because they're tough to diagnose on a weekly basis because you got to predict game script, you got to predict touchdowns, these things that have high variance on a weekly level. If you're a DFS player, you already understand this. So yeah, it's just interesting to see like the impact that the best ball explosions even had on drafting guys.
Yeah. So the way I think, for today, like for the rest of this show, like we're talking about, obviously, guys, we're trying to cover things this is stuff you can apply to all formats, but it's just important to kind of remember these things. And when we talk about the players that we will get to here in just a bit, they're guys that I really want to be targeting because I feel like their ceiling case is someone that it's like, wow, I want to have this guy in my lineup every week. Now they may not get there, right? We're just playing probabilities here. Not all these players are going to work out, but they're going to be guys that have some of the characteristics that both Rich and I are looking for, or one of us are looking for. And we may argue about a few guys. We'll see where we land. So real quick, Rich, I was actually going to open with this, but before I go any further, just kind of as a tease before we get to the players, is there a certain name that's a year 4 or later wide receiver this year that you really like, and like just give the folks like a few reasons? What I'm kind of trying to do is set up is I want to hear your thought process and how that really aligns with some of the things that, I've got set up to talk about. And then we can come back and we can unpack it. But I think it's nice to like give people an example of a player like right up front, and then some of the analysis you're doing behind the scenes and what makes them valuable in your mind.
Yeah, so like you, similar, approach, just kind of like a different, railroad track kind of. When you look at these like year 4, year 5 guys that break out, guys that are drafted in like the wide receiver 3+ range, like the majority of these hits are guys on new teams or guys getting new quarterbacks, right? Like that's kind of the thing. You change your offensive environment. Cortland Sutton was like an example of this last year. We thought who Cortland Sutton was, right? We were like, this is what Cortland Sutton is, and then like Bo Nix is able to
And then
kind of
we were
change
wrong.
Yeah, exactly. The first guy that stands out to me, and I'll say his ADP is climbing to an area where maybe he doesn't qualify for this anymore, is George Pickens. Like he's just the blanket guy. I mean, this is a guy through 3 years has finished the wide receiver 53, 38, and wide receiver 40 in fantasy points per game. Like people have done this dance. Like people are like, oh, you've told me George Pickens was going to be good, but look at what he's given me. I've gotten nothing. But now he's in a position to where he probably loses a healthy amount of target share, but one that has kind of underlying upside because he's trading off like quality of targets and maybe offensive environment. You look at him so far, he has basically averaged 15 yards per catch playing with Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson, Mitchell Trubisky, Justin Fields, and Mason Rudolph. That group of guys, 15.4% of his career targets have been inaccurate because of that group of guys. The only receivers with a higher off-target throw rate over that span since here in the NFL are Deontay Johnson. Whoa, shocking to see his name pop up on the same list. Amari Cooper, Devontae Adams, and DJ Moore that has many targets as George Pickens. And since Dak Prescott entered the NFL, he's 7th in accuracy rate throwing to wide receivers. Even if George Pickens remains at face value what he is, a field stretcher, an outside X, this is still like an upgrade for that role. Since he entered the NFL, 28% of his targets, 20 or more yards downfield. No player has as many targets as Pickens has had with a higher rate. Since Dak Prescott's been in the NFL, he's 4th in rating on those deep throws, 8th in accuracy. And like, we're talking about throwing to guys like, obviously a CeeDee Lamb, but we're also talking about
Gallup.
like Michael Gallup, like Jalen Tolbert even had a little hot stretch at the start of last year. And then when you talk about, so if he's just at face value, what he has been at Pittsburgh, and it's an upgrade for that role in the Dallas offense. But what if there is more added upside here? Obviously, we know if CeeDee Lamb were to get hurt, there's some contingency stuff here. But what if he has like a T. Higgins type development? Because one of the other things I found, like you did in these year 4 and 5 breakouts too, is the environment changing could also be not that player left in free agency, but someone on his team left in free agency.
Yes.
And Tyler Boyd, like I look back on this and it was so obvious and I kicked myself for it. It was like Tyler Boyd leaving the Cincinnati Bengals last year unlocked T. Higgins to access the part of the route tree he hadn't had access to this point in his career. You look at him last year, 67% of his of his targets were within 10 yards line of scrimmage, by far the highest rate of his career. What if there's an example here where he could just be in like a T. Higgins-esque like type development here, playing with the Cowboys, who are going to have probably 100 more dropbacks than last year's, Steelers had as well. So he's like kind of the face down value. I will say, I don't know how if you did like a lot of research on this too. The one thing that maybe like you want to pump the brakes if it gets too high is that a lot of these, like if you want to look for like the wide receiver one scoring season, like the true breakout, a lot of them don't come attached to other wide receiver ones. If you want to chase that, it has to be something like what we had with Higgins last year. You need a team that's going to throw like 600 plus times. And I do believe we do have that in place with Dallas this season. I mean, the secondary is a mess. We don't really believe in that backfield being able to like really run the football effectively. So I do think that does exist in the range of outcomes. But that's kind of what's held back guys like the Devontae Smiths of the world, right? Like when you play next to these alphas in low volume offenses, it's really hard to just jump that hurdle.
Yep. Like, no, so I love this. Like you're a lot of great stuff there, like to unpack that we can start to get into. And I think, when we talk about Pickens, he's one of my favorite. He's one of my most drafted wide receivers. To your point, he is starting to get a little bit steamed up in drafts, but mostly underdog. If you look at him right now, like consensus ADP over at FantasyLife, you guys can check it out on the ADP tool, and we've got it for ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, CBS, FFPC, Real Time Sports. We've got all these together, and you can sort it by whichever league you're in, obviously. But I kind of also find the value in the aggregate, right? And really, for most leagues where he's still ranking and going. Now, we don't have a ton of fantasy drafts under our belt, but where he's going to be sitting in these queues for your home leagues is still in a really good range. And in fact, myself and Mr. Ian Harditz last night got him in round 5 of a real-time sports draft. So I mean, at the end of round 5, because we had pick 12. So like right there at that 5-6 turn. So I still find value there, but just real quick to add on to what Rich was saying, because we'll kind of tap into these things. When you look at the underlying target earning ability of George Pickens over the last 2 years, 23 and 26%. So that 26%, that's a wide receiver one worthy mark. And what I mean when I say that is if you go back and historically look at wide receivers that finished in the top 12 since 2011, what kind of target share have they had? 26%. Like he's already shown he can do it. Now, to your point, he's going to have to play alongside CeeDee Lamb. But what I love about what you said and what you unpacked there was the fact that I have the Cowboys projected for 2 complete NFL games worth of additional passes versus what I have the Steelers projected for.
Yep.
So that in itself kind of offsets the
Yep.
what you're going to have to deal with CeeDee Lamb. So, but just looking at some of the other things, man, this guy, when he gets man coverage, and this is something that Matt Harmon talks about a lot. I can't chart data. I can't chart film the way Matt Harmon is, which is why we reference him. But he always talks about the ability to beat press man, the ability to beat man coverage being one of the more sticky things that he's found in his analysis as far as projecting forward. And so man targets per route run, 30% last year. That's wide receiver one worthy. Air yards, you already talked about it. Like nobody has more targets down the field, 44%. That's wide receiver one worthy. His yards per route run, 2.11 and 2.06. Those are wide receiver 2 numbers looking back historically. And then his PFF receiving grade, which is mostly, if you guys know how PFF receiving grade works, is mostly what you do with the ball after you get it. Right. It doesn't have anything to do with getting open. It's what you're doing after you get the ball. And he's a playmaker, man. It was wide receiver 2 worthy as well. So just to kind of tack on to some of the things that you said there, but I think that the big part like that really came up for me with him is that change in environment, right? Pickens is just kind of got drowned out. Bad quarterback play. You get buried in an Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith is actually not a bad schematical coach, in my opinion. He's just maddening with player utilization. Like he just takes guys off the field for unknown reasons. So I love what you brought up there. A lot here. So let's jump back to the high level. And I wanted to, so we talked about already, going back and looking at what we see with the breakouts for years 1 through 3. So now I'm going to put something on the screen for folks and I'll talk through it of what do these wide receiver for year 4 and on breakouts, what do they typically look like? And what I mean by that, what have they typically done already on their resume from a wide receiver finish in previous seasons in fantasy. All those extra data points I gave earlier, yards per route run, all those things, those are all additional context. But a lot of times, like the simplest thing, Rich, is you know what correlates the most strongly to next year's fantasy points per game? Last year's fantasy points per game. Now, we like to check under the hood. Once we see that, we're like, okay, is this real? Okay, I see the car looks great on the outside, but like, is there an engine in it? I mean, does the thing turn on? And so we like to look at these additional data points to see, does it back up what we're seeing on the surface? Or it could be the opposite. It could be, man, this car looks like a complete piece of junk. But once I open the hood, oh my God, like this has got a 6.2 Hemi. I don't even know if that's a real thing. My brother's the mechanic. I like work on spreadsheets, guys. But the idea being is that sometimes those underlying data points might point us to a player being better than what they've previously been. And I think we get that, with Pickens as an example. So just real quickly here, of the wide receiver 1 breakouts that were in year 4 plus, okay, 14 of 17, 82% of them had a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 finish already on their resume. So they've already shown you something for the most part. These are not guys that have been wide receiver 6s, and been completely buried. They've shown some sort of sign that at a fantasy point per game level, they can do a little something for you. The next thing, 9 of 17, this goes back to why I love the Pickens example right out of the gate. So 53% experienced significant offensive changes in their breakout year. And you mentioned it. It's not just changing teams. It could be a quarterback change to your team. It could be someone leaving your team that's a really high-end target earner. Think back to whenever Golden Tate left and then what Doug Baldwin did. So this change that happens in your environment. And so far, Pickens is checking both of these boxes, which is why I love that you brought him up first, because I think he really is one of the best year 4 breakout candidates. And then 3 of 17 experienced a substantial offensive change the year before. So kind of back to your rookie comment, year 1, they're coming in, they're learning their scheme, they're learning their offense, they're learning the NFL. There's kind of this mini thing going on here. So Robert Woods is a great example of this. He came over to the Rams. He posted a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 2 season that first year with the Rams. And then he posted a wide receiver 1 breakout the next year. Mm-hmm. So I kind of put those two last buckets, together. And really the trends are similar, for wide receiver 2. So just taking a step back, like your thoughts on like some of the other macro trends like that you have, and maybe some of these same things, but maybe there's some other things that you've seen, like when you take that zoom out approach to these later breakouts.
Yeah, and I found an overlap too of like just guys that didn't have that extreme draft capital to afford them early career opportunities, and then had that domino fall. Like I'm sure on your list, like Julian Edelman when Wes Welker leaves. Yep. Brian Hartline when Brandon Marshall leaves. Mike Williams, his first breakout, he did have the draft capital, so apologies for including here, but like when Hunter Henry leaves, like Juwan Jennings actually fits that bucket better than Mike Williams had the early capital.
Juwan Jennings is a good one.
But Juwan Jennings had to, he played with guys that were just
Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. He
was roadblocked, man. He was roadblocked, and he finally. And I think a lot of people were in the Jennings camp. I actually really liked him as a prospect too, and he's the kind of guy I was keeping tabs on to get an opportunity. But he fits that bucket. Doug Baldwin, another guy like that. Just didn't have the draft capital. Adam Thielen, like these are all guys that just like. So you look a bit later. One of the guys that, and it's not a great sexy group of names to apply to 2025, but not popular probably in your drafts right now, but Tutu Atwell is one of these guys. They lose Cooper Kupp and they lose DeMarcus Robinson. They do bring Devontae Adams in, but they lost 2 receivers from the roster. He's probably like the closest guy that like he had teammates leave. The Rams immediately when free agency opened brought him back. And like his per route stuff.
What did he get? He got $10 million for a year, right?
Similar to like the Bateman contract a year.
Tutu Atwell, I will say this. When he's been given his opportunities, and he hasn't been playing with both Cooper Kupp as well as, Puka Nacua on the field, which is going to be tough for anyone, guys. When he's been one of the guys on the field with those, or the only guy on the field, he's produced pretty well. So I that's a deep one. I like the pull.
Yeah, because when we talk about these stats, we want to give you examples of how to apply stuff, because this free agency class wasn't good. Like top down, it just wasn't good. So like the application of some of this stuff is going to be some names where you're like, ooh, really? Like Josh Palmer is one of these examples, right? Like Josh Palmer is like a deep cut, like Diami Brown. Like these are all because it just wasn't a sexy group of free agent movement and trade movement. Like
What's
Pickens.
interesting with those guys, like I think I like Palmer's fine. I don't expect a blow up though, just because I feel like we've already seen his opportunities to be a target earner in situations where they really needed him to be. Meaning they had injuries to Keenan Allen, they had injuries to Mike Williams. We've seen stints of, and he's had a good quarterback. So he had Justin Herbert. So when I get to him, I kind of fear with him, he's getting, I don't want to say he's too steamed. He won't be steamed. And this is where I have to be careful again, guys. Like, I think he's getting steamed in best ball, and he's still a fine pick. You're not having to spend like a top 9 round pick on the guy. Yeah. It's fine. You're going to run into some spike weeks with him, and it's fine to stack him with Josh Allen. I'm a little less interested in him in a home league, but I have also reminded myself that, man, we could see it. There's still it's at least it's an out for him. I'm going to give a quick list real quick because you're giving some good names, Rich, but you started to give some of those historical names. So here's a summary of the players that experience a change after year 4, okay, in their offensive environment and what they went on, to do. Here's some of these examples. Pierre Garçon, 2013, signed with the Commanders. The season before, he went on to, and so he posted that wide receiver 3 season that first year with the Commanders. The next year, he goes on to be a wide receiver 1. What happens? They bring in Robert Griffin Jr., and they bring out this RPO offense, right? You've got, now defenses are like, what the hell, dude? Like, I have to worry about Robert Griffin gashing me, for an 80-yard touchdown or a hammer. And people forget, man, Alfred Morris had that really good year, and he was a perfect fit for the scheme.
That's Shanny.
It's like the Gus Edwards, Lamar Jackson thing that was going on after this, right? This was the pre-version of that, was Robert Griffin, as well as, that with Gus Edwards. And then you had Garçon out here, who had already flashed a little bit with Peyton Manning in Indianapolis. And now he's in this perfect scheme. And he got hurt that year, too.
Shout out Mount Union.
Yeah, Mountain Union. Emmanuel Sanders left the Steelers for the Broncos to go play with Peyton Manning, where he took the place of Eric Decker. He became a wide receiver 1 that season. Jeremy Maclin
in NFL
2004. Yeah. Amazing. Oh, dude, I had so much Peyton Manning that year, and I love it.
Do you remember week 1 of that season? Just dropped.
Yeah. Wasn't it against the Ravens?
Yeah.
Or was it the Falcons?
It was the Ravens.
It was the Ravens, because Flacco had a good game too. Flacco was kind of going toe-to-toe for a minute in that game. Dude, the good old days. Jeremy Maclin. So this one's interesting because you talked about it. It's another example. Deshaun Jackson left. Deshaun Jackson's 25% target share left the building. Jeremy Maclin, a first-round draft pick that had shown some signs, now gets to step into this big role. Golden Tate signed with the Lions, partners with Matthew Stafford, the Kingmaker. Doug Baldwin, Golden Tate left with his 24% target share the year before. Devontae Adams, this is a fun one. Aaron Rodgers only played 7 games the year before. And then you get Jordy Nelson leaving, and Randall Cobb only plays 9 games, and you get the eruption season from Devontae Adams in year 5, right? Adam Thielen, the Vikings upgraded from Keenum to Cousins. Robert Woods, I talked about him earlier, signs with the Rams, gets was a wide receiver 2 season, and then he gets that wide receiver 1 the next year. Will Fuller, the Texans trade away DeAndre Hopkins and a 29% target share to the Cardinals. Fuller goes on to be a wide receiver 1 that season. DJ Moore, this is the weakest one, guys, but it qualified. He got traded to the Bears. I still don't know how he put up a wide receiver 1 season, and I wouldn't call it repeatable with Justin Fields at quarterback, but it was a change of environment, and he became a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, you just listen. I've talked this before because a lot of people are doing the Garrett Wilson, Justin Fields narrative. We just need Emmanuel Forbes to become a starting cornerback again. Like that's what we need. Like,
those guys. Yeah, it was. He roasted. Was that the Commanders?
Remember, it was like a 3-week stretch where Emmanuel Forbes gave up 200 receiving yards to everybody. AJ Brown just ragdolled him the week after. It was and then we just never seen him again.
Poor guy. Man, can you imagine? I have bad days, but could you imagine a stretch like that as an NFL corner, and you're on prime? I mean, it's
a rookie, you're just thrown out to guard all these dudes. It's just man, it's rough life.
So, I think this change environment is a really big thing, and so there's some guys that we'll talk through here in a minute that have that. But before we start jumping into that, anything else like that stands out to you with some of these, later breakout candidates? We've talked about the fact that typically they have shown some signs of something, right? And usually they've got a wide receiver 2 or 3 finish already on their resume. We've talked about the changing environment stuff. Anything else? How important is draft capital to you? Once we get to this point, like I care about draft capital, but I start to de-weight it.
Yeah, because
the
we talked
further out
about
we get.
we talked about even if you came with the capital and you're in year 4, like it's kind of irrelevant, right? Like they probably already made changes. If you're not productive, they've added pieces to the offense. They've added competition, right? We've seen that with like even Quentin Johnson, even though he got better, right? Like they're going to keep adding competition to the room. But yeah, like everyone always has like inundated everyone to understand like future fantasy success usually comes from someone that was successful. And there every year, like I was talking to Scott Barrett about this, and like he brought a point. He's like, there are like 4 or 5 guys every year that people just leave for dead that are productive players, and it's the same thing. Like we've got guys out here like Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, right? Who do fit this criteria. And you might say, well, their their environments were good last year and they were bad. Like they may not be an upgrade this year.
They were
But
hurt.
yeah, but they were injured and doing stuff. But these guys are like not being drafted at all as starters right now. And when you look at Cooper Kupp, I know I saw your tweet bring up the Adam Thielen corollary, like when Thielen went to Carolina. I also brought up in my tiers article about the overlap he had with like the Stephon Diggs season his last year in Buffalo, because through 2/3 of the season, Cooper Kupp was pretty solid last year and pretty like good. And then the last imprint we have him is him being bad. So what's worse, to be bad for like 1/3 of the season versus 2/3, or just have it be at the end of the year, like our last imprint? It's like, these are tough things to quantify, but like,
Yep.
he's getting buried because of that. We know he's going to a system that's going to run extreme 2 wide receiver sets and tight splits, which have kind of been like an efficiency unlocker for wide receivers. Like, that like he's gonna have a bump in efficiency. He's gonna play a lot less in 3 wide receiver stuff. So like, does he have like a little bit of a bounce back? Like, Deebo Samuel, we don't know what's gonna happen with Terry McLaurin. His ADP hasn't even moved through the Terry McLaurin stuff because everyone just assumes he's gonna come back. But if there was one team Deebo Samuel could have left Kyle Shanahan for, wouldn't it not be this offense to be productive? I mean, you look at everything that Cliff Kingsbury did with Jayden Daniels in year 1, throw rate behind the line of scrimmage, throw rate on slants. Like, these are all the things Deebo Samuel does. Like, this is one of the worst yak teams in the NFL last year. One of my favorite stats last year, Jayden Daniels threw 3 passing touchdowns last year, whereas his pass catcher ran the ball into the end zone. The only players with fewer were Trevor Lawrence and Cooper Rush that qualified for quarterback rating. Like, that, there's a reason they got Deebo Samuel. They had no dudes that could create anything with the football in their hands. Like,
yeah,
so
just to back up what Rich is saying here, and these guys, I think they're great to bring up. They're not truly breakouts in the spirit of, and this is where our analysis was different, right? You're basically looking at, hey, who are the values? And so my wide receiver strategy article came out today, which is along the lines of, I think, some of what you're talking about. And I outlined Cooper Kupp, but I just want to throw up on Twitter. This is something, that I had thrown out, but it's like backs up what you're talking about. So essentially, we don't know if Deebo Samuel is washed or not. Number one, like dealing with pneumonia, we don't know how much that impacted him. Maybe it was not much at all, and he really is just done. But I don't buy the stuff about when I see the pictures of Deebo being, fat. Deebo's not fat, guys. He's thick. THICC, thick. And he's always been thick. Has he gotten a little thicker? Yes.
We all have.
Right, we all have. But it's because what he's asked to do is basically play running back all the time. His receptions are also running back plays, where he has linebackers running at him. He needs to be a bigger player to sustain the role that he has. So when I look at Deebo, what you said, I think is so, spot on. And I'll try to be a better host and make this a little bit bigger for the folks that are following along on YouTube. But Cliff Kingsbury offenses, to your point, if there was ever an offense besides the 49ers that was custom made for Deebo Samuel, it's Cliff Kingsbury. So wide receiver screen targets, here are the ranks for Kingsbury's offenses. 2024, the 3rd most in the league. 2022, 2nd. 2021, 1st. Wide receiver RPO targets. Go back to what we talked about earlier with Robert Griffin III, with Pierre Garçon, and the pressure that puts on a defense of an RPO with Jaden Daniels and then a guy like Deebo, if he's not washed, it puts tremendous stress on a defense. RPO targets to wide receivers in Cliff Kingsbury's offenses, 2024 ranked 4th in the league, 2022 ranked 10th, 2021 ranked 8th, and then wide receiver rushing attempts. 2024, he didn't have an option, guys. It was 24th. But 2022 and 2021, Rondell Moore, 8th and 5th. This you couldn't have asked for a better spot. I'm not saying it's going to happen for sure, but what I see here is a coach that's going to want to accentuate Deebo Samuel's strengths that we have already seen from him for his entire career.
Yeah, and he's the cheapest he's ever been in his career too, right? Like, and same thing with Cooper Kupp. And all these guys won't work out. We're just trying to highlight, like, hey, we're just trying to give you a North Star. Like, hey, this is like the aisles you want to be shopping in when you're taking wide receivers this late in the draft. These are like what you want to be targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we jump into, unless you've got anything else you want to hit on a macro level? Do you have any other things that you want to
Well,
mention,
let me
or do you
just
want to get
break
into
this
the players?
down from
Do your
what
thing.
we established, right? So between your research and my research, we've said that, you want to be targeting with your wide receiver 3 plus picks to add to your roster. Guys in years 1 through 3 on their contract, players changing environments, whether that be a player leaving their team or, them getting a new quarterback or just getting a new team in general. So we've applied, like, these are the areas you want to be shopping, right? Like grocery aisles you want to be in when you're making these picks. So there were 11 wide receivers last year who were drafted as wide receiver 3 or lowers that were better than wide receiver 2 at cost. Let's go down the list real quick and see if they check the boxes we all just highlighted. And my data goes back like yours. Like my data is derivative for 15 years. It goes back to 2010. Brian Thomas Jr., rookie. Terry McLaurin, new quarterback. Jackson Smith-Njigba, year 2. Lad McConkey, rookie. Jerry Jeudy, new team. Player leaves his team during season. Cortland Sutton, new QB. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd leaves, new opportunity spike. Jacoby Myers, opportunity spike. Devontae Adams gets traded in season. Jordan Addison, year 2. Jameson Williams, year 3. Juwan Jennings. That's the list of 11. Tit for tat, everything we laid out, the area grocery aisles you want to be in, every single one checked the box.
Love it. Love it. So now let's jump into some of the guys that we're going to say, and these can be a little tougher because they haven't already they don't check the years 1 through 3, right? And a lot of the names that, we just talked through did. Now, not all of them, but those were the things where we had a situational change. I'm going to kick one off. You already grabbed DK Metcalf, one of my favorites. But I'm going to say Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah.
Jaylen Waddle. Now, again, guys, Jaylen Waddle, he's already been a wide receiver 1, not by my criteria. His best season ever is 15.5 fantasy points per game. That was his rookie season. Remember, the cutoff for me is 16. So maybe I'm being a little bit technical, but I think he deserves to be on the list, but mainly because you're getting him super late in drafts right now, guys. I'm just real quick. Like, I got to go over here and see this. Where is Waddle at in our ADP tool? I also got to make this smaller, like, because he's not moving. Even though there's the injury information, coming out around Tyreek. So consensus, pick 74, right? So if you think you're in a 12-man league, you're talking about a guy that you're getting at the end of round 6, right? I mean, round 6, 7 turn. Like, I love Jaylen Waddle. And I think, when we look at the things that he's done, number one, he's already, he checks the main criteria of he's already been a wide receiver 2, 3 out of 4 years of his career, guys. And I get it. And you made a great point earlier. The most recent impression is the one people are left with, but he's still in his prime. This is a young player still in his prime. And if you go back and look at some of the underlying data points, he's got the draft capital. He was very well liked in the rookie supermodel. I know you also do your prospect, modeling and everything you look at. I'm pretty sure that Waddle graded out good for you, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So there are all these things going in his favor, and the whole Dolphins offense was just bad last year, guys. It was bad, and Tua missed time. So I feel like there's a lot of outs for Waddle that are kind of similar to Devontae Adams when he finally had that big wide receiver 1 breakthrough. So number 1 could just be Tua plays the majority of the games. And I get it, people. It's a risk, guys. Tua could suffer another concussion. He could miss a mass amount of time. I get it. but I think it's pretty well priced in at where you're getting this guy, in drafts right now. At the end of round 6, I really like that. Jonnu Smith is gone, so Darren Waller comes in, but we can't. I'm not assuming an 80% route participation from Darren Waller. I think he's going to be out there like 55%, 60% of the time, more like what we saw from Mike Gesicki back in the day. And there's also the out, guys. What if Tyreek Hill did hit the age cliff last year? And now suddenly Tua's healthy. Tyreek did hit an age cliff, and an offense that actually knows how to still punch these scheme buttons. If you look at wide receiver motion at the snap, you look at play action rates, Mike McDaniel ranks at the top of the league in all these categories, and they're cheat codes for wide receivers. And so there's this scenario where suddenly the offense centers around Jaylen Waddle. Think about it, guys. He scored 15 and a half fantasy points as a rookie. And then Tyreek Hill arrived on his team, one of the best receivers in the NFL, and he still scored 15 fantasy points per game. When I look at this, and he scored 9.7 per game last year, 12.4 in the 10 games where he and Tua were healthy, which was a wide receiver 3, that's the outlier data point to me. To me, you're drafting a player that's probably, if Tua's healthy, finishing as a wide receiver 2, you're drafting him at the wide receiver 31 right now. So you're drafting a wide receiver 2 at a wide receiver 3 price that has wide receiver 1 in his range, of outcomes and historical hit rates based on the work that I've done on him, Rich. Getting to the wide receiver 1, I'm not saying it's a huge chance. It's 2 of 21 guys that fit his criteria. So 10%. So I'm not saying like it's for sure going to happen, but I just think there's a lot of good things to like about it. And mainly is you're probably getting a wide receiver 2 at a wide receiver 3 price tag.
I hate to just be in so lockstep with you because people would probably love for us to disagree on a player, but I'm so far above board on Jaylen Waddle for a number of reasons. The why I'm high on him. One, you just said, well, he does check a box. As a significant target share left his team. Jonnu Smith is traded. Yeah. So he does check one of the boxes we were looking for. I've talked a lot about the Miami Dolphins, what happened to them last year. I talked about it in the worksheet during the year last year. No team faced 2 high safeties at a higher rate than they did last year. And not just because they have the fastest, team in the NFL. It's because they weren't able to push teams out of that coverage like they did the first 2 years with Mike McDaniel. The run game absolutely collapsed on itself. Their most frequently used offensive line combination for the season was only on the field together for 35.7% of their snaps. Their running backs just could not get. They were 28th in yards created before contact. And this just kind of caved in. All the splash plays for the offense were removed because teams weren't able to push teams out of all that shell coverage. Obviously adding James Daniel, massive improvements. We'll see what Savi does, as a rookie in round 2. Getting Austin Jackson back will be massive. Devin Achan's splits with and without Austin Jackson were incredible. Like, it's almost a dead even split too, which we love when we get these samples, because sometimes you get these small samples with a guy off and it's just not big. But
yeah, and that year before they lost Robert Hunt.
Yeah, lost Robert Hunt
to the Panthers. So it's like they're replenishing some of that. And then to your point, the injuries. I love the offensive line call out.
Yeah, and so I do think, and they're not going to jump. They're not going to be a top 10 offensive line, but I think it is more manageable. We'll see what Patrick Paul does. The loss of Armstead is big, but I do think that this, because the bar is so low, set from a year ago, what happened to them.
Yeah, the Armstead loss does hurt.
It could just be better by default. I mean, the interior is definitely, I believe, better on paper because Aaron Brewer really fits that scheme really well. He's they need their linemen to move. They want their linemen to get out. And but then you have Johnny leaving, you have the offensive line potential, just improvement. And when I say improvement, being better than last year. And then you have kind of this other factor of the contingency stuff. What if Tyreek Hill is just like Antonio Brown and like they just move him? Like, because if anything goes south for the Dolphins this year, like it just makes all the sense in the world for Tyreek Hill to be this year's Devontae Adams. Like, he's gone. Yep. He's a big brick of salary. You can get something for him. And then you just unlock this massive upside where Waddle just becomes this like just huge contingent value, because since Miami added Tyreek, Jaylen Waddle has run 246 routes with Tyreek Hill off the field. On those plays, 27.6% target rate, 32.4% of the team targets, almost 3 yards per route run. Like, he would instantly be a wide receiver 1 if that.
Yeah, and he plays mostly in 2 wide receiver sets. Yes. And you a lot of times has
the same reason why
tight end on the field and a fullback. It's like as good as he is, he's by far the best option whenever that's the personnel that you have on the field. And oh, by the way, if you do throw the ball out of that formation, you're designing it to be in a way where you're going to get the defense to think you're doing one thing, and really you're getting the ball to Jaylen Waddle in space. And the Penguins still has speed.
And the other way to play that too, that last scenario, is another guy checks the box that we're looking for is they also have a year 2 wide receiver on their bench in Malik Washington.
Yeah.
That would, I believe, because if you're trading Tyreek Hill, you're basically saying like we aren't competing anymore for the most part, unless like again he's just like a basket case. But Malik Washington, I believe, would step into that role, and then you get so in these best ball leagues, I've been wanting to add Malik Washington at the end too as well.
I love the Malik call out. Looked really good last week. It's just preseason.
I loved him as a prospect.
Yeah, dude. And he fits this offense. Get the ball to a player in space using some sort of deception at the snap, and then let them just use their natural traits. Malik Washington, great deep pull. So we did Pickens. We did Waddle. Who's your next name?
I see. I want to do a gross one because maybe we'll get a Well, I want to do a gross one because we might get a disagreement, and that
Let's
might
do something
be,
gross.
that might be fun too. So I just want to pull up some of these, numbers last year to make sure I cite them correctly if I could get to them, because I wasn't actually prepared to get here. I actually can't find them, but it's definitely it's Wandale Robinson though. Like I was gonna get, I'll find the stuff, but like so basically, when you look at what happened to Wandale Robinson last year, we're getting this change, right? Like we're getting 2 guys that can now push the football down the field. He had Daniel Jones, he had Tommy DeVito, Cutlets. Everyone loves the Cutlets, and Drew Lock last year. The offensive line was a disaster. Please let Andrew Thomas stay healthy, man, for 1 year of the NFL. And they just had to throw all these just like these piddly passes. Malik Neighbors is about to blow up too downfield, like the best belief. And obviously that's priced in, but a lot of people are just saying Wandale Robinson has to be what he was last year. And they're saying like, all right, well, these quarterbacks are good for Darius Slayton, but are they good for Wandale Robinson? What if Wandale Robinson is a better player than we've seen? What if he was used in the capacity he's been used because of the offenses he's been a part of? So like, I at least want to keep that door open. He's like wide receiver 60, like an ADP. But so last year, this is the most hilarious season I think I've ever looked at. He also led the NFL at 39% of their targets on third downs, which is a really, really weird stat. But he had 699 receiving yards on 140 targets last year. Since targets have tracked, only Chris Chambers, this is a fun show because we're bringing up
Chris Chambers, man, going back to the
Dolphins.
Dolphins.
Had fewer yards on more targets. He had 677 yards in 2006 on 154 targets. His yards per catch were the fewest of any player that have 90 or more receptions ever, since like that's been a stack. And it's like a full yard below like the next closest dude. It's like a Jarvis Landry Miami season. But we already seen in week 1 of the preseason, like he's going to have probably more of an opportunity to play more outside receiver and get access to some of these routes. I'm just saying at his pricing, like he's another one of the guys that checks these boxes as a very cheap player.
Yeah, what I'm going to say is you have a really good thing going for you. So back-to-back shows, this name has come up. Ben Gretsch brought up Wandale Robinson yesterday, so maybe I'm off base here. I've not been drafting a lot of Wandale, although he does check some of the boxes. And maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, but when I think about Russ as quarterback, I do think more of like this vertical prowess. And Russ, honestly, is not really that good at the underneath and intermediate stuff. I do think height becomes a challenge, much like what we see for Kyler Murray. And that's really been what's hurt Russ so much. The way the defenses used to play was perfectly fit to Russ's skill set, right?
Mm-hmm.
They run the ball, get you to want to stop the run. He finally gets the singled up man coverage downfield with the single high safety. He just reads that safety and he drops in a dime, to either Lockett or DK Metcalf or one of these other guys going back multiple years. And nobody can drop the moonball bucket in there like Russ. But that's his strength. And so I guess when I look at Wandale Robinson, I think the routes probably are going to be there. I think the playing time, to your point, is going to be there. I just wonder, like, how much, like, does he get utilized, and does the team, I just feel like Russ could go more to Darius Slayton. Now, the counter to that is also that teams want to play the 2 high T's, or they want to play the single high so deep that safety can get to either side of the field, no matter like when the quarterback lets the ball go. And so really, are the opportunities even going to be there for Darius Slayton, even though that's what fits best with Russ? And so I do think there is an out here for Wandale Robinson. I mean, I've got the utilization report up on the screen, guys, and you can check out the new version of it over at FantasyLife.com. You can get 20% off if you use the code Dwain, DWAIN. So go check it out. Right now, I've got the game log view up. But what Rich is talking about here, man, 25% target share. That's good. Low ADOT player, but you talked about him getting some access to some of the outside routes, then potentially moving their trio of wide receivers around a little bit more this year versus just keeping them static. So I like that. You also talked about the third down targets. I've got third and fourth down together 36% of the time. They went to him. Now, he didn't convert a ton of those. A lot of those were check downs on like third and forever.
Yes.
But he did get the targets. And the other thing I'll say, when you have these low ADOT guys and you're playing in a PPR league, their catchable target rate is so high. There's just a high conversion on their targets into actual catches. So if you're playing in a full PPR, I think Wandale actually gets a little bit more leg room here.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a gross one. So
it's still, hey, 10.7 fantasy points per game. That's a wide receiver 4. Going back to 2011. But no, hey, dude, you and Ben Gretsch have both brought him up. You know what that means? That means I'm going to start drafting some Wandale. I don't have enough. Two very smart people have now come on this show and said the same thing. So I will be adapting, and I encourage everyone else to also, maybe not listen as much to me on this one. So let's go to one here that I list everyone, but I don't like it this year. And it's Garrett Wilson. Oh, yeah. Garrett Wilson, I have been a Garrett Wilson truther since, the supermodel. I didn't have the supermodel actually yet. The year that Garrett Wilson came out, I did rookie analysis, but I had not built a model yet. But I can now look at him in the model, and he scored very well going back and looking at it. So great prospect. Obviously, coming from an Ohio State program where he had to compete for targets with, I don't need to rename them, guys. You guys know all the round one prospects that come out of this school. It's there in LSU. Like, they just churn these players out. And honestly, Garrett Wilson has been maybe the most unlucky, talented wide receiver that I've seen since Allen Robinson. Like, I somewhere in that bucket. You come in, you have to play with Zach Wilson, who was terrible. I mean, terrible may not even describe it, right? So 12.8 fantasy points per game as a rookie with a terrible quarterback. That's a wide receiver 3 finish. That's not bad. And then he had to do it again another year, 12.8 fantasy points. And then you finally get the upgrade. And yeah, Aaron Rodgers isn't what he was, but you finally get the upgrade, 14.9 fantasy points per game, but they go trade for Devontae Adams. It's like, can this guy catch a freaking break? Yeah. And it's one thing to get Devontae Adams, who's already good, but when it's Devontae Adams, who's basically like, Aaron Rodgers is BFF, and you got that whole dynamic going on. So what I want to say about Garrett Wilson, guys, is this. I think Garrett Wilson has the talent to be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. I think everything about his underlying data profile tells us that. There are some hints of Deontay Johnson, which does a lot of the underlying things really well, could spike for a wide receiver 1 season, but maybe he's not as elite as we think. But I tend to lean more towards he probably is a wide receiver 1 caliber player on the right offense. My challenge, Rich, is Justin Fields. Yes. Justin Fields has averaged 180 passing yards per game in the games where he's played 90% plus of the snaps. So he's been hurt a lot. So getting rid of the games where he had to leave, halfway through, getting rid of the games where they just put him in to be like, run packages, things like that. So when he really got to be the starter, getting rid of that stuff. But I mean, this is DEFCON 1 level stuff. Going back and looking to 2004 or to 2011, on teams that threw for 175 to 200 yards per game, only 2% of them went on to give you a wide receiver 1 finish. 14% of those players gave you a wide receiver 2 finish. And yes, I did go back and also look at guys to further hone that down and say, okay, let's actually just look at the guys that were on those teams that could actually earn targets. And there was one. Vincent Jackson gave you a 15.6 fantasy points per game. All of the other guys, y'all, and Corey Davis is in this mix. He was like 11.5 points per game. They were all wide receiver 3s. So I call him out here because he's year 4. He actually checks a box. There's a quarterback change. Devontae Adams was leaving. He checks another box, and he actually gets a scheme change. I mean, Tanner Inkstrand, like, this could be just quite a bit better offensive scheme. Like, there are some positives here, but man, Justin Fields is just scary stuff for me. And so I think most likely you're drafting a wide receiver 3. I think that's his most likely outcome this year. And you're having to pay a wide receiver 2 price tag on it. And I think he has less than like I don't know, putting percentages on this stuff is so stupid, but so I won't even do it. It's not a good chance to be a wide receiver 1 for where you're spending the pick. And the number one thing we hear is DJ Moore. Well, DJ Moore did it. Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm with you here on this one too. I mean, listen, Vegas lines are not the be all end all, but Garrett Wilson's touchdown total that you could a player prop you could bet right now is touchdown total is 4.5, and and he's like locked into the third round. Like it's by far the lowest of like any player with like high capital that you have to invest in. And like you said, it's more. I'm concerned about like the volume. I do think Tanner Inkstrom is going to probably do some more interesting things with him. You've talked about moving him around more, and when you move a guy into the slot more, it gives you more access to more like the on target targets, like you talked about with Wandale, right? Like a little bit, like those are more catchable targets because that's been kind of the bugaboo for his career. Last year he didn't have that problem because Aaron Rodgers, he had a career low 13%, off target throw rate. But now we have Justin Fields, who since entering the NFL, the only quarterbacks throwing to wide receivers who have an off-target rate worse than Justin Fields, which is 18.2%, are Aiden O'Connell and 1 year of Caleb Williams. That's it. Those are the only guys. So it's not great.
That goes into the utilization score, guys. And the only things I put into the utilization score are things that are sticky within the season. It's not always sticky year over year because you could have a quarterback change or whatever, but it's a big component of the utilization score. And what Rich just said, like it's another, I think, again, great call out. I should have already mentioned it. It's a massive reason why, like, so let's say you get a 30% target share, which is very in the range of outcomes.
Oh yeah.
Very much in the range. What is that actual target share worth? Like what, 24, 25%? And honestly, guys, we've seen this movie.
And in an offense that just like the passing volume, like you talk, like Justin Fields' yardage just tied into volume. Like the Jets were third in the NFL in drop back rate last year under Aaron Rodgers, and they were 3% over pass rate expectation. Like since entering the league, Justin Fields teams have a 54.1% drop back. Like he's 29th in dropbacks per game as a starter. Like, so even if he has like that target share, which obviously like the site, like in context of this offense, it's going to be a target reduction because Garrett Wilson's been top 7 in the NFL in overall targets every year of his career and has not had a top 20 wide receiver scoring season per game.
Yeah, see, I can't get into it.
Well, let's pivot to
it's the price thing, man. That's the killer. You're having to take Garrett Wilson in round 3. But, well, that's the problem.
That's why I want to use that to pivot to his college teammate, Chris Olave, who's left for dead.
Yeah, I love it.
He should be so much. Him and Garrett Wilson should be much more tighter in ADP, and that might say more about Garrett Wilson's ADP than Chris Olave's ADP. But especially if you're in a full PPR site, because I do think there is some touchdown concern to have with Chris Olave. But in these full PPR sites, especially if you're doing like Best Ball and DraftKings or something, like, dude, he's going like wide receiver 30. He's going to get so many first read targets like in this Kellen Moore offense. Like Kellen Moore gives so many freebies to his slot receiver, and Chris Olave is going to move into that slot. He also moves his wide receiver 1 around more, and he's just not going to be that guy that moves into that role. It's going to be Olave. I mean, if you're in a full PPR site, he's like a great wide receiver 4 on your roster. Like he's just not going to kill you.
Agree.
And this is a guy who's averaged over 2 yards per out run every year in the NFL, every single year. In his only game played without Derek Carr last season, he caught 8 passes for 107 yards with Spencer Rattler. Like, I mean, this is a guy I think at his price is being left for dead. And I get my one concern is the touchdowns. He could be a 4 to 6 touchdown guy. And I do like the upside, like him
because of the bad offense, not
because of the yes.
Yeah, but he actually has the skill set to be a guy that could pop off for 10 or 12 because he can get deep. And honestly, has a wide receiver run worse than a lot? Maybe Calvin Ridley has a wide receiver
who
run
we'll probably
worse.
talk about too out the door.
Yeah, has a wide receiver run worse in the NFL over the last 3 years of actually cooking their man and having like 1 to 2 steps of separation downfield, and their quarterback which is high variance, guys. These are high variance throws. Your deep completion rate is not sticky for most quarterbacks. There are outliers where it's actually pretty good every year for certain guys, but as a league trend, it's not a very dependable thing, like how accurate you're going to be on your 20+ yard throws. But Olave, man, has run like terrible, and he has done his part, but the quarterback didn't do theirs. And man, there's a highlight reel. I think Harditz has one up.
Probably
you guys can go find. Yeah,
he's like the king of that stuff. But it's the inverse of the Garrett Wilson argument, though. Like, we, by all accounts, are expecting the Saints to be rough as a team. They're gonna have their passing volume is gonna be significantly higher because they're gonna be bad. Like, so we have an opportunity,
and they don't have a quarterback that wants to turn 10 to 20% of the dropbacks into scrambles.
Yes. So, I mean, I look at this, especially, I think this is more of like I said, full PPR context here. You look at the slot stuff because he's coming from a career low, playing in the Clint Kubiak offense, career low slot rate. Kellen Moore inherently loves more 11 personnel. Olave has been targeted on 28% of his routes from the slot, over 2 yards per route run. And he also averages over 2 yards per route run. It's crazy. All of his underlying metrics look better than Garrett Wilson's too, which is interesting.
Chris Olave, he's already given you a wide receiver 3 season, 13.
And people do the concussion stuff too, but like we just can't predict.
We can't. 14.3 points in his second year, so a wide receiver 2 finish. Yeah, Devontae Adams is a good example on the concussion stuff. So like he checks the boxes. Like, this is a guy going into year 4. We've got a scheme change. We don't like the quarterback change. We'd rather have Derek Carr, to be honest.
It's priced in now. It's being priced.
It is. Yes, it's priced in because you're getting this man in round 7. And here's what I will say about Chris Olave. Like, if he played with Josh Allen, if he played with Patrick Mahomes, if he played with one of these other quarterbacks, I'm of the belief you would have already seen a wide receiver 1 season from this man. Like, I think he has the talent to be a wide receiver 1. To your point, I have him and Garrett Wilson really close as far as talent profiles, but you guys can see it on the screen right now. Targets, 26%, 26%, 19%. But last year in his healthy games, you got to get rid of those games where he left with the concussions. It was a 29% target share. Now, it's a small sample last year. That's a wide receiver 1, period. Targets per route run, I want to do it. Man targets per route run, though, 27 to 28%. Wide receiver 2 worthy. Air yards, 42%, 40%, 33% in his healthy games last year. Those are wide receiver 1 worthy numbers. You already talked about the yards per route run. The PFF receiving grade every year, man, 82.9, 82.9, and 83.0 wide receiver 1 worthy. So we're talking about a guy that can get open against all coverage types. We're talking about a player that can attack all areas of the field. We're talking about a player that's sneaky good with the ball in his hands after the catch, better than what most people think. His ESPN open scores, and this kind of goes back to him cooking people, but not necessarily having the balls get dotted when he needs it. 7th, a score of 82, and then he was 14th with a 75, and then last year he was 12th with a score of 80. Now, I'm not huge into separation scores, but it's still good context, and with Olave, that is how he wins. He wins through separation. Some guys don't need the separation. They're just my ball guys. Like, hey, man, I'm open over here. I'm bigger. Just throw me the ball. Brandon Marshall, those kind of players. Olave wins via setting up, the defender and then cooking them and getting that separation. And so I think this is a great call out. He's one of my guys. I think he's got all the ingredients are there for the year 4 breakout. Obviously, the environment is challenging, but like you said, look at this. I wrote this in July. He's a similar bet to Wilson with a 4-round discount.
Yeah, man. They're like
what you just said.
Yeah, 100%. I was in an FFPC draft last night, and granted, you only are forced to start 2 wide receivers, but I mean, he went firmly like wide receiver 36. Like it's crazy to me in a full PPR format. Like, he's just a guy that's not going to bury you. You can pull him out in those formats and be solid. He's going to give you solid lines. And his first, I guarantee you, when we go back to like in the season and people are citing first read target share stuff, like he's going to be amongst the league leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. He's going to be amongst the league leaders in target share, period.
Yeah.
What I found with first read target share, and I like it, is like it mostly just overlaps with target share. Where I love it though.
I mean, we find fancy ways to say the same thing.
Yeah. But where I do love it, and so hat tip, Scott Barrett, Fantasy Points, all those guys who are putting these things together. I love it for running backs because most running back targets are check downs. When you go and you look at that first read, target share to running backs, it really tells you like the offenses that are trying to truly incorporate their running back into their passing plans. And it takes a good one. It takes a CMC, a Kamara, that sort of profile, but it's a great way to get a jump on a name that might be doing that we don't know about yet. So yeah, big hat tip for the first read target share on that front. So let's get a couple more guys in before we wrap. It's just the next one on the screen here. I'm going to go Jauan Jennings. You had mentioned him earlier, but I got to bring him up because this is a year 6, going into year 6. So this was a year 5 breakout for him last year. Wide receiver 2 finish for him. And here's the interesting part. So when you look at Jennings, well, first of all, he's going round 8 right now, guys, and he's falling further than that. He's got a calf, quote unquote, injury. Could be a hold in. But we don't know. He's not practicing right now. So it's something you got to keep an eye on. So he's going even later than this. Last night in the real-time sports draft that the Fantasy Life Championship, by the way, that Ian and I did. You got to go check that out. $300 entries. We got Jauan Jennings in round 10. And it's like FFPC. You only have to start 2, but you could start 2 more. So I mean, there's 4 potential wide receivers starting on your roster. But he's interesting because he was this year 5 breakout. And I'll be honest, Reeves, like when I went and I looked at this, I didn't expect to be as impressed with the guys that broke out that late and what they did the next season. And so I'm just going to kind of read them off real quick. Emmanuel Sanders was a year 5 breakout. He scored 18.8 fantasy points, and the next year he scored 15.2. People were like, I went down. He still gave you 15.2 fantasy points, okay? That's a wide receiver 2. And you're drafting this guy again in round 9 or 10, 8, 9, or 10 right now, depending on the site. Will Fuller, got to throw him out. He got injured the next year. Doug Baldwin, 16.8 fantasy points. So he was a wide receiver 1. And he was a 15.6 the next year, so a wide receiver 2. Golden Tate, 16.2, was a 13.2, so was still a wide receiver 3. Edelman, you called him out as being one of the examples for Jennings, so good call out by you. 15.5 went to 15.9. Mike Williams is another one that you called out, 15.3, went down to 13.6, so still a wide receiver 3. Adam Thielen went from 15.2 to 19.2. Hat tip, Theo Grimminger was the first one that mentioned this when I put this tweet out. We can't get overly specific with these. Like the idea here is like we're looking at a group of players. And my main thing is saying, even if Jauan Jennings doesn't turn into a wide receiver 1, like a lot of these guys were still wide receiver 2s or 3s. But Theo called out, he said, Thielen's my favorite comp of the group because he was kind of buried. He was not an early round draft pick. He hung around on the team, managed to get that next contract because they saw value in him. Then he finally got on the field. Thielen went from 15.2 fantasy points per game to 19.2. In his following season after a year 5 breakout. So like, dude, this is just like, again, coming back to price, where you're getting him. And the one other thing I want to say, and I'll let you talk about Jennings. I hear people and they're like, man, you take away that 46.5 fantasy points in week 3. Number 1, I don't like doing that, but number 2, fine. Let's play that game. Let's go ahead and play that game.
Take away the player's best game.
There's a good cut point that we can use, which is when Brandon Ayuk got hurt, because Deebo Samuel's now gone. So we've subtracted a player, boom, checking a box that we like to talk about. We've got Brandon Ayuk recovering from injury. We know it's going to be at least 6 weeks, maybe longer for him coming back. We all love the potential of Ricky Pearsall, but unproven. Now, so if you go back and look at after Brandon Ayuk's injury from weeks 10 to 18, getting rid of that 46.5 explosion, he averaged 14.1 fantasy points per game, guys. So he was still giving you wide receiver 2 production over that stretch. He had a 28% target share. That's a wide receiver 1. And I mean, if you were watching the games, guys, Brock Purdy loves this man.
Oh, yeah.
Brock Purdy will just absolute lock in. He had a 2.26 yards per route run over that stretch. That's wide receiver 1 worthy. He had an 83.7 PFF receiving grade after the Brandon Ayuk injury. That is wide receiver 1 worthy. So my first instinct, these are my favorites, Rich. When your first instinct is that when you go to do the research on a player, they meet certain criteria, so they're going to be in your article, but then you're going to do the deep dive and say yes or no on them. My gut was that I wasn't going to like Jauan Jennings. And then I did it. And I was like, actually every single data point here is positive to even, right? It's either even to what we had last year or an up from last year. So I actually really like Jauan Jennings and drafting him this year.
I mean, listen, there's not a 49er outside of Brandon Ayuk I haven't been hammering this year.
Yeah.
I know one of Pearsall and one of Jauan Jennings is absolutely going to obliterate ADP. I've been drafting both because Pearsall also checks some of the boxes. We're doing the year 4 plus. We're doing the year 4.
Yeah,
plus
he would have been in our year 1 through 3 breakout show.
I like to look at other things like when guys were actually on the field. When Jauan Jennings was on the field last year, he had 31.7% of the team targets. That was wide receiver 12 in the NFL. And, you know, granted, some of that was influenced by just who the 49ers didn't have on the field. And then like real target rate per route run, where you remove things like sack, like plays that didn't have an actual target available. He was wide receiver 12 also in target rate per route on that too as well. Like when you remove sacks and scrambles and throwaways and stuff. So like this is a guy that, and he's active in the run game, which matters for this system. That's the one box that Pearsall is going to have to check early in the season, because when Ayuk comes back on the field, we know there's going to be an inherent squeeze in this offense because it's just not a 3 wide receiver.
They don't run 3 wide. Yep.
And it turn into a rotation. That's the one wrinkle we have here. So, but we know Jennings is active in the run game. So like, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how Pearsall kind of gets up in that capacity, because we know it matters for this offense. But yeah, I've just been hammering those 2 guys because I really like Jauan Jennings as a prospect. He was one of those guys that's like, man, this guy, if just give him a shot. And then when he finally played in the Super Bowl, like it was like, oh yeah. And they bring him back after they drafted Pearsall in round 1. It's like, man, they know they have something here. And then, because it didn't matter what role he had to fill last year. If Deebo was out, he played that, you know, he filled in for Deebo. When Ayuk was, because remember early in the season, Ayuk was trying to get ramped up because he missed all training camp, and he played well in that capacity. And when Ayuk was out, he had that role in the offense too as well. When Kittle missed some time, he was able to get a bump too. So yeah, I mean, he's just a glue guy, just a really good guy, I think, to have at his price point. Like I said, I'm just hammering these 49ers.
Yeah, I'm with you. John Daigle was on with Ian a couple of weeks ago, and Ian asked every guest kind of like, what's their secret to success for the 2025 fantasy season, and Daigle's very succinct response was like, I'm just hammering 49ers, man. I mean, I'm getting after it on these 49ers. So getting CMC in the mid to late round 1, and then turning around and being able to nab these wide receivers. So all right, we got time for one more. Rich, are you gonna do something nasty, or are you gonna do something, where are you going? You going
No,
all the way up, or?
I mean, I think there's still the obvious one out here. That's Calvin Ridley, right? Like it's kind of, and you know, Calvin Ridley's been in this bucket before and hasn't hit, but Calvin Ridley has had some real weird usage from the teams he's been on the last few years. And I'm hoping that, and it was 1 week of the preseason, we're not going to go crazy, but some of the things that we really
liked the route concepts last week.
Last season, I don't know if it was a byproduct of just the quarterback play they had, but the things Calvin Ridley was asked to do just were never going to come with a high success rate, even if he had Russell Wilson. Like if you would have put Russell Wilson on this team, yeah, maybe it would look better for Calvin Ridley. But like you said, it would have been a lot like how Pickens, we talked about, like he was held back by just kind of some of his usage. Like it's just hard to win for fantasy football when all your routes are like coming with 15 air yards. Like it's just really, really hard to win that way. And it did improve. Like there was a little stretch here we had at Mason Rudolph where like he got to do some things like near the line of scrimmage and it helped out. But you look at Calvin Ridley, 27% of his targets last year were 20 or more yards downfield. Like that's just the only guys that were higher were DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Jordan Addison. And 18% of his targets with Will Levis in the field were inaccurate. It went down to 10% with Mason Rudolph, which helped smooth out some of that stuff. But the deep target stuff should be better with Cam Ward. That was like kind of his bread and butter. He's got that like arrogant arm strength, and he's got a little bit of things.
Arrogant arm strength. I love it.
He's going to be coached out of some things like Josh Allen was early in his career. Do you remember Josh Allen when he came into the NFL from Wyoming? He tried to do, we used to call him Sugar High Josh, right? Like, because he would do some borderline crazy shit, man. Like,
he would throw to double coverage to a fullback.
He threw that pass to Patrick DeMarco in the playoff game.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes.
Come on, man. But so Cam Ward is a little bit in that game where just because like his arm strength is so good, like he would buy time and be like, I'm going to make this throw. Like he's got to get some of that stuff coached out with him a little bit. Our guy Ryan McChrystal actually comped him to Josh Allen, not from like the athletic stance, but from like coming into the NFL, like
stylistically as a thrower.
Yes, yeah, stylistically as a thrower, like something. And we've seen Josh Allen like made that transition. Like he's like one of the best quarterbacks now at like all the negative stuff, like negative plays, which is
And
pretty wild.
I kind of, I kind of like the scheme here. You're gonna get a lot of 3 wide receiver
We
stuff,
thought it
but
was going to be a bump last year, right? Like with Callahan, because like that coaching tree is just one, like, especially in this era of the NFL, the way they combat defenses, they didn't do enough of that last year. But I look at the
yeah,
Titans,
I agree.
and I don't think the Titans are going to jump and be like this juggernaut. But when you look at the changes they made on the offensive line this offseason, and they're another team that was snake bit by offensive line injuries last year too, but they made changes in the offensive line. You get improved quarterback play. Also, is Cam Ward the least talked about number 1 pick? Like I can't remember like a number 1 pick that, like, not even getting like any excitement. Like it's
Yeah.
really weird. But
I'm taking him over a lot of the static, pocket passing quarterbacks
right.
at the
It's
end of a
super weird,
draft
but
if
we've
I need
seen
it.
now these rookie quarterbacks elevate in recent years. We talked about McLaurin and Cortland Sutton, and Nico Collins 2 years ago getting CJ Stroud, having kind of that lift off. So yeah, I think the marriage of getting Calvin Ridley more access to like the free square stuff or easier targets, plus the quarterback improvement. I mean, I'm once again, we're going down this road, and I know a lot of people are rolling their eyes because they're like, Calvin Ridley again, really? Like, but I
Also
think it all.
Price
It's
also,
yeah,
and he
Chigakonkwo is the number 2 target in this offense.
yeah, which I actually do like.
I do.
I think Chig's finally gonna get an 80-85% maybe route participation. He's one of my favorite late
Are you
round
drafting
tight
in these
ends.
FFPC leagues? Like, yeah, like
Yeah, I'm drafting Chigokonkwo everywhere. We drafted him last night. We got Trey McBride, who fell to us at the end of round 3. So we had McBride, but later we were just like, you know, this is a sign of, I'm getting a little older. I'm like, I'm doing a lot of writing, a lot of content in the week. I'm like, let's just go ahead and add the tight ends so I don't have to go pick them up off the waiver wire that week. We have Trey McBride on the bye week. And we had a really strong roster. Like, it was very balanced. So I didn't, like, if I had felt the need to pass on having a second tight end when you have Trey McBride. But off of that tangent and back to Calvin Ridley, what I'm showing on the screen now, utilization report, guys, again, looking at the game log view, again, 20% off, code Dwain, DWAIN, but I took out the games with DeAndre Hopkins. So now we're talking weeks 8 through 22 last year. And I think this is the way you can think about splits, because this is something that you just mentioned. It's not like they added the ghost of Tyler Lockett. Okay. I hope Tyler Lockett, has a rebound year, but he's probably not.
he's gonna look
Probably
weird
not.
in that uniform. Sometimes these veterans change teams. Like Tyler Lockett in the Titans uniform is a weird
It is
one.
going to look weird. It is going to look weird. And then, you got a couple of 4th round guys. Like, there's some things to Alec Iomaner's game that I like, but he's a 4th round draft pick. We got Chimeri Dyke. There's some things there that are nice, but again, round 4 picks. So like you said, I'm pretty locked into Chigokonkwo being the number 2 target. That means there's a lot of room here for Calvin Ridley. Last year, after DeAndre Hopkins was left the team, went over to the Chiefs, 26% target share for Calvin Ridley. He averaged 14.1 fantasy points per game, man. And he will cook people down the field. He's another guy, like we mentioned with Olave, that actually does his part and really gets his man beat and has been missed a lot. And it wasn't just getting missed last year by Mason Rudolph as well as Will Levis. It was the year before by Trevor Lawrence. Calvin Ridley is a player when you turn on the film and what he can do at all 3 levels of the field. And he's not a complete player. There are holes in Calvin Ridley's game, guys. We're not saying like he's the best player ever, but I'm with you. He is a good enough player that it would not surprise me for us to be able to see him end up being a guy that posts mid-range wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 2 kind of finish, and you're drafting him as a wide receiver 3 in your league, and with an outlier chance at being a wide receiver 1 in fantasy this year.
Love it.
Yeah. All right, Rich, tell people where they can find your fantastic work. You've already referenced some of it. Sounds like you got a new wide receiver article up today. So yeah, let the folks know where all the good work's at.
Yeah, sharpfootballanalysis.com. It's where I've kind of had the draft kit kind of going all off season. I've got one more series to write, which is, I know, everyone's favorite. It's the answers to the test. Like next week will be a position by position outline of how I'm drafting each position. Cause
Love it.
like I come out of 4th of July and I do like these massive things I do every year. It's like the tiers, which is like the player profile stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of take a step back from the individual player stuff. And I do like league trends and like fantasy football trends. And I've written through all that. And that's not everyone's favorite from like an SEO stance, but it illuminates a lot of ways to play fantasy football from a game theory side. So I've gotten all through that, and now I'm just going to like lay out like, all right, this is exactly how I'm taking every article I've written all off season and applying it to how I'm drafting teams this year. So next week that will be on the site, and then Dwayne, the week after that, I'm writing week 1 content. Like I'm gonna be it's the only week of the year I get to work ahead of the games. So I'm gonna take advantage of that before Labor Day and start writing up some week 1 content.
Yeah, and then you just pray that there's not like a pulled hamstring in practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't want to have to rewrite too much. Well, and we really appreciate you coming on. Again, like Perplexity said to begin the show, you're. I think basically what it said is you're a stud, Rich, and we love you in the industry, and I appreciate you jumping on. And this is great stuff. So, folks, hope you guys enjoyed it. Go get some of these wide receivers, and I think the keys to remember here, Rich kind of summarized them early on. We're looking for them checking these boxes, especially for these late round breakouts. They've got some sort of change going on in their offense, and they flash that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 potential before. So make sure you're checking them out. And it all does really come down to cost. You're getting so many of them so cheap right now in your drafts. And Rich, you're talking about the strategy stuff. My wide receiver strategy article dropped today, so folks can find that for free over at FantasyLife.com. But I talked about a glutton, man, a glut of these wide receivers in your home leagues, and basically round 6 through 9, you can start taking them in round 5. I kind of like in home leagues this year. I'm not, again, well, we're signing off here. We're getting out of here, but you really can wait. I think you can grab one really good receiver and you can get like 2 or 3 running backs, and then you can come back to your wide receivers again, just with the way the shape of what ADP is doing this year. There's a lot of flexibility. You don't have to go down that path, but I think it's very viable this year. So we'll be interested to see your answers to the test when that comes out next week and see how that aligns.
Yeah, listen, everyone have a blessed rest of summer and get ready to enjoy the 2025 season.
All right. Appreciate you guys. We will see you next time.